Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Really good, really good. This is gonna be a fun episode today. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Me too. I think this is, for me, an episode where I'm definitely going to learn a lot and
Hmm.
walk away with a list of things I need to follow up on, which is kind of my favorite type of podcast.
Yeah, that's right. So today, we of course are talking all about one of the funniest shows ever to come out of Canada, and that's Kids in the Hall. They've been in the news lately, of course, because we do have a new season of the show coming out. When we're recording it, it's going to be coming out tomorrow. But when you're listening to this, it's going to be out now on Amazon Prime. So, we thought, us being a Canadian library, it just made sense for us to talk about one of the funniest Canadian shows of all time, right?
Absolutely. It made sense to everyone but my mother, who, after listening to the last episode where you teased this one, next
Hmm.
time I was talking to her, she said, uh, are New Kids on the Block having an anniversary this year? And I thought that was a weird non sequitur. We don't usually talk about them. And I was like, I mean, they have an anniversary every year, but I
Hmm.
don't. And she's like, well, then why are you talking about them on the podcast? And it took me a minute to realize that when she heard Kids in the Hall, she imagined New Kids on the Block. So
Yeah.
I thought about coming in and just like hitting you with that New Kids knowledge and just pretending that's what I had prepped for. I thought that would be very funny, but instead,
Yeah, that
uh,
that would be rather funny. It's funny because like you kind of mentioned that to me before, and then I was like all paranoid. I was like, "Oh wait!" Like I had to go back and listen. I'm like, "Did I accidentally say New Kids on the Block last episode?" But
no,
no, it was Kids in the Hall.
I definitely would have picked up on that.
So yeah. By the way, thank you once again for listening, Caroline's mom, and
Yeah,
we hope you enjoy this episode. So, but yeah, today, obviously Kids in the Hall, and we've got a couple of staff members joining us today to chat all about it. We did a call out, and we're like, hey, staff, like if you're a Kids in the Hall fan, we'd love to chat with you. And our two guests today immediately put their hands up. So first, we want to welcome to the show first-time guest Caroline. We love having first-time guests.
for sure.
From a library assistant at the Clairview branch, Kyle Burley. Kyle, welcome to Overdue Finds. How are you today?
I'm feeling pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you work at the Clairview branch, and we've had actually a couple staff members from Clairview on. What's the best thing about working at the Clairview branch?
Best thing about working at the Clairview branch, well, there's two things. For me, well, first of all, wonderful staff here, great management team, but also I can walk to work and back. So I live in this neighborhood, so it's the perfect branch for me.
There's a lot of different branches that have staff who can walk to work, and I know that really does add to the feeling of it because it's your community, it's a part, you are a part of where you live. So yeah, that's a great thing.
More than once, when I'm walking to work, I'll walk past somebody's townhouse or whatever, and they'll point over and say, "Hey, you work at the library." I said, "That's me." So I'll see you there soon.
They're like,
Yeah.
can you take this book back for me, please?
That hasn't happened yet, but you know what? If I was on my way to work, I probably would do it anyway. So.
Nice. Well, we're so excited to have you joining us today to chat about Kids in the Hall. And of course, we want to welcome back to the show library assistant with our EPL to go literacy vans. He's actually the co-host of his own podcast called I Love This, You Should Too. Indy Randhawa. Indy, welcome back to the show. How's it going today?
Thank you. Just hanging tough over here. My mother also, when I was a child, my sister was really into New Kids on the Block. I was really into Kids in the Hall, and it was the same thing to her.
Oh, yeah. I think there's ground there for something. I'm not quite sure yet. Maybe I'll figure it out by the end of the show.
Indy, I have to mention, we joked about this before we started recording. The last episode you were on was on our Christmas episode where we were talking about It's a Wonderful Life. If you listened to that episode, you might not have caught on that we were having some technical issues with Indy's Wi-Fi connection. So like if you listen, I think it's like the second half of that episode, there's barely any Indy on the show. So we did not cut him off, but we did our best to work around that. So hopefully today, no more technical issues.
I'm sure I'll make up for it by talking way too much today because I'm very excited.
So before we get to our Overdue Finds picks, Caroline, we of course on the show here love having members of, as you call them, the Overdue Finds family on the show, and we've got an amazing team of people behind the scenes that help out with the show. And one of those people, I just personally want to give a big thank you to, and that's Meg DeForest. She recently left EPL to accept a job out east. And I just wanted to, quickly give her a quick shout out and thank her for all the work that she's done on the show, whether it's editing, as a guest, occasional co-host. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and wish her all the best and in her new gig.
Yeah, it was always a great conversation when Meg was on the show. She was just recently on in the Lion King episode and talking about her experiences, science fiction picks. We'll have to maybe see if we can reach out to her so that we can stay up to date on those. And behind the scenes, she was really important on shaping what the podcast is. And so we definitely wish her all the best and hope maybe she can start a podcast where she's going and have some kind of crossover, perhaps.
Yeah, we're always looking for that ultimate library podcast crossover episode, and
it's gonna happen.
And I'm sure where she's going, she probably will convince them to start a podcast of their own. And but we wish her nothing but the best and thank her for all the awesome work she's done here on the show over the last few years. So, Overdue Finds picks time. Kyle, first time on the show. Let's start with you. What's something that you've been enjoying lately?
Okay, well, it's actually, this was harder than I thought because I've already read a number of really good books and seen a number of really good movies so far this year. But I decided on a novel called Devil House by John Darniel, who's he's also the songwriter and the lead singer of the Mountain Goats. This is his third novel, and I think his best. And it looks and sounds like a horror novel, but it's something else entirely. It's told mostly in first person. It's about a true crime writer who has a very immersive style, and he's investigating a notorious crime in a small California town that may have involved satanic rituals. And it is about that, but it's not really about that. Really, what we come to realize over the course of the novel, because he's narrating it, is that he's having a crisis of conscience about what being a true crime writer really means, because he has heard from the family of someone who was in an earlier successful book of his, and he didn't realize the impact that his work would have on, other people. So it delivers the gory goods if you're worried about true crime, but really it's about a crisis of conscience, and it's beautifully written. So I would recommend that one for sure. Yeah,
that sounds really good. I've talked about this on the show quite a bit. I'm a big true crime fan and everything. So and I'm also a Stephen King fan. So kind of that horror true crime element. That sounds like a fantastic book. Is it a fairly new one?
It's quite new. It was published in 2022. We do have it in the collection now. I was attracted to it because I was a teenager in the 80s, and I remember the Satanic Panic, and that's what drew me to the book. But I was pleasantly surprised to discover it's not quite the book I was expecting, which sometimes is a bad thing and sometimes is a very good thing, which is the case here. So,
well, I'm gonna have to add that to my holds list here coming up. So, Indy. How about you?
So my overdue find for today is astronomy, the general topic of astronomy. and kind of just being a casual fan of things, because it's weird that you can't be a casual fan of something like that because people are often casual sports fans. It's all right if you can only name three Oilers, you're still allowed to go to Oilers games. You can talk about which Spider-Man movie is your favorite and you don't need to be a film critic. But for some reason, people don't say they're casual fans of things like neuroscience or astronomy. Or maybe we are, but we feel like we're not confident enough to say that, oh, yes, I like astronomy. But for all those people, just remember that people who have no idea what they're talking about will argue that Austin Matthews is a better player than Connor McDavid. And of course, that would be nonsense. How could they
Oh,
think such a
yes,
thing?
absolutely.
So, in the same way, why can't we argue what our favorite nebula is? I want to go to a bar and just hear a guy going like, "Oh, homunculus nebula, that's the nebula for me." And then the other guy's like, "What? Have you seen the new pictures of M43? Homunculus is garbage." So I suggest people be casual fans of things like that. So if you're looking to get into astronomy very, very casually, as I am, I got into it from the photography side. So at EPL, there's a couple of really good books that just have beautiful pictures, and that's what enticed me to learn more about what I'm looking at. One is The Universe Through the Eyes of Hubble, and that is a collection of photos from the Hubble telescope, of course. And there's also a really beautiful book by DK called Astronomy: A Visual Guide. And those ones are great if you like the visual end of things, if you want some background knowledge, but something that is at a very accessible level. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a book called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, and it is just that. And I thought, can you really approach astrophysics in a casual, like astrophysics for dummies sort of way? And you can. And that book is available both in print and the author reads it himself in the audiobook. And there's even a version that is astrophysics for people in a hurry for children. So if you have a young astrophysicist in your world, maybe that would be a good pick for them.
Nice. Has astronomy been a topic you've always been interested in?
Not really. I feel like I've gotten into it quite recently, and I think I enjoy the individual nature of it because I think everyone should have some solo interests. And it's so easy for things like sports and movies that I was talking about. So many things get ruined
Mhm.
by people. People are everywhere.
For
But
sure.
with astronomy, it's almost free from that. I don't often hear about exoplanets making racist tweets or anything. So I can get into that, and it's free of society, free of anything that might be getting you down. So it's a nice kind of escapist thing to get into, and it makes you feel very, very small, but in a beautiful way, I think.
Nice. I love it. It's probably it seems like it's a very relaxing hobby to be
Really
into.
is.
Nice.
And I like what you said about the photography, the picture element of it. As you were talking, I realized that the 500s, which if you're in the library, the pictures of other planets will be in the 500 section of the library, and those are actually frequently books that I put out on display in the library. If you're here and you just want to look through something, the pictures, the photography, the it just is a neat kind of flip through read. So, yeah, lots available to discover.
And
I
if you
like
want
that.
a pro tip when you visit your local library, the oversized books can often be separate, and those oversized astrophotography books are often really beautiful.
All right. Caroline, what have you been enjoying lately?
I have a documentary. It's been a while since I've had one, I think. Don't go back and look at the tape. It might have been last week that I had one. But a documentary, My Darling Vivian, a documentary about Vivian Libretto, who was Johnny Cash's first wife, the mother of his 4 daughters. It's a story of their relationship, how they met and fell in love, and all of the letters that he sent to her, calling her my darling Vivian, their relationship, their marriage together. Then he became the Johnny Cash that everyone knows, and that involved a lot of travel, a lot of promotion, a lot of time away from the family. And then his relationship with June Carter Cash came along. And so there are a lot of different elements to this documentary, but one of the most interesting for me was, what do you do when your love story is presented as the barrier to a greater love story? Because that's kind of how the narrative of Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash ended up being. Anyone who's seen Walk the Line will have seen that played out in a semi-fictionalized kind of way based on true events, but taking liberties with the personalities, or the true nature of maybe what happened. And how do you live with that if you're the first wife or the kids in that situation, and seeing that play out? The 4 daughters, the 4 Cash daughters, were involved with the making of this documentary, which is always a good thing to be aware of, but for a documentary that has family involvement like this, I would say it's a fairly even look at everyone, at Vivian, at Johnny, at the rest of the people involved. They're critical of Vivian in some places, and point out places where things weren't great. They're really honest in it, and talking about the different relationships that they had with their mother, depending on kind of how old each of the daughters were when things fell apart. There's also a very interesting through line of racial uh, involvement, and that spun from rumors that Vivian was in fact black at a time when that would have derailed Johnny Cash's career even more than, and the fact that that came out during like his drug bust trial, and it's like, that's okay, but this we have quite, and it's just really interesting to look at all of the pieces of this, and to learn more about a woman who you've probably never heard of, but you may have heard Walk the Line, which was a song that was written for her. So, yeah, My Darling Vivian, EPL has it on DVD and streaming.
Nice. Which streaming service is it on?
It's on Hoopla.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I watched Walk the Line, but yeah, obviously Vivian's in that movie, and yeah, it's interesting because it made me kind of think of a lot of like those like rock music biopics where it's like it does show the first wife or whatever, and like, I mean, I don't recall how she's really portrayed in Walk the Line, but like half the time it's kind of like, they're kind of like nagging and like, why aren't you at home, and all this other stuff, and like essentially painted as like trying to hold them back, if you will. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think, like you said, you made a really good point too about like, if since that documentary has like the involvement to the family, like right then, it's not like, like a hit job or anything like that. Like they are trying to like bring the facts across about their own mother.
Yeah. So, Bryce, what have you been enjoying lately?
So, much like Kyle, I kind of, well, not a book pick, but I do have a movie pick this week, and it's a little bit of a darker one. I've talked about this before. Like, I don't know why, like, I love these kind of like BuzzFeed lists where it's like, the best movies that you only want to watch once, or the most like dark movies you need to check out or whatever. So this is a movie that's been kind of on these lists all the time, and I've never seen it. And finally I was like, do we have it in our collection? And we do, sorry. And the movie is The Vanishing from 1988. This is a movie that I've been kind of I've read about over the like probably since I was a teenager and have just never found a copy, but we have it in our collection. So the movie itself, actually, this is a Dutch film, and the original name of the movie is actually called Spoorloos. And you can, but if you look up The Vanishing in our collection, that's where you'll find it. So essentially, it's a psychological thriller. It's about a young couple named Rex and Saskia who decide to embark on a road trip. They stop at this busy kind of truck stop to get gas and food, and there's like a park there. There's tons of people everywhere. Saskia decides to run into the gas station to grab some drinks for the road. And
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, Saskia.
Don't do it. So, of course, Rex is waiting for her, and she never comes back. Like I said, this is a busy station. They're on the middle of a road trip together, and she just happens to go missing. So, of course, panic starts in. He starts looking for her, can't figure out why she isn't there. So the rest of the movie essentially follows Rex as he frantically looks for Saskia, but while he's also being tormented by the man responsible for her disappearance. Now, I really don't want to say much more than that. I've kind of painted the picture. This is essentially the setup to the movie, and but I really don't want to say more to ruin your enjoyment of the film. The movie is extremely creepy. It is very disturbing. It's one that, after you watch it, like, this is a movie that really stayed with me for a few days afterwards. And still, even now, describing it, I'm like, oh man, that was such a creepy movie. But at the same time, it definitely does fall into that category of a movie that you're going to love it, but you're only going to really want to watch it once. So I can't recommend this movie enough. If you're looking for kind of a really dark thriller, please go check this out. Now, it's funny because I remember as a teenager, a remake of this movie came out, I think in 93 or so. Jeff Bridges is in it, Kiefer Sutherland. It's actually directed by the same guy. It definitely, like, I remember watching it, but I couldn't tell you whether or not it's good, but I've been reading some online reviews of it, and people are just like, skip the 90s version, but go watch the original, The Vanishing movie from 1988. It's incredible.
I can agree. The remake is fine, but see the Dutch one.
But you're right about it being a movie that you probably never want to watch again, because I saw it when it first came out and was blown away by it. It just stuck with me for weeks, and I've never watched it again, but I still remember it vividly. So that's a remarkable piece of film.
Yeah, it's a good one. We have the Criterion edition of it in our collection on DVD. So there's lots of like little behind the scenes interviews and stuff like that. So, if you want to do some reading about the movie online and check that out.
This is usually where you introduce the topic, Bryce, but I mixed things up on the outline this week, and I have my Kids in the Hall facts for us to get us started.
Perfect. I love these fun facts.
This week, I shouldn't say that. They feel more procedural, maybe factual facts, but we'll see how fun they are. The Kids in the Hall was formed in 1984 when Bruce McCulloch and Mark McKinney were in Calgary doing theater sports, and they met up with Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald, who were in Toronto performing under the name Kids in the Hall. Scott Thompson joined the group in January of 1985. And then the group almost immediately broke up and did other projects before reforming in 1986. That's when Lorne Michaels of SNL fame saw them perform and put the idea of a TV show in motion. A pilot aired in 1988, and it started as a regular series in 1989 on CBC in Canada and on HBO and then CBS in the States, where it ran for 5 seasons. Recurring characters, and I know we'll talk more about these later, but some of them included the Chicken Lady, Cabbage Head, Buddy Cole, and 30 Helens. The show was followed by a movie, Brain Candy, in 1996, and a, a series in called Death Comes to Town in 2010 that featured in it some of the characters from the show, along with a narrative story. And there have been many other reunions, specials, and tours in the years since, culminating in, as you mentioned, this new Amazon series.
I guess what's everybody's history with Kids in the Hall? Kyle, do you remember watching it for the first time? And have you ever pretended to squish someone's head?
Never. I don't know why you would think I would do something like that.
You're not
Anyway,
doing that right now.
Almost from day one, at least when it was on CBC, I did not see the first episode, but I'll just shout out my friend Richard. He said to me, "You have to watch Kids in the Hall. It's so funny." And he had recorded the first episode, so we watched that. I remember it had the Head Crusher, it had the Eradicator, it had, I think, one of the Cathys was in it. And from then on, yeah, I was hooked. And I'm pretty sure I've seen every episode over the years. So I was a fan right from the start. Didn't know who they were. But yeah, so I followed them ever since.
Did you watch any of the kind of like Death Comes to Town or any of the kind of other like spin-off ones?
Although neither of those are a home run, it was good to see the kids out and doing other things. I think Brain Candy actually maybe holds up a little better than I thought. I actually just rewatched it on YouTube a couple of days ago, and there's some really funny bits in it.
Indy, how about you? Like, do you remember the first time that you watched it?
I might not remember the actual first time, but I know I started watching it way too early. So it debuted when I was 5, and I don't think I was watching it then, but I was still watching the last seasons when they were on the air. So I was like a 10-year-old kid watching Kids in the Hall, which I probably shouldn't have been. But at a very young age, I got a camcorder when I was 6 or so, and me and my best friend, we'll do a shout out again, Galen Pendleton, who is now a director here in town who does film and TV. We started out making little movies. And probably at that age, outside of The Simpsons, Kids in the Hall was the biggest influence on us. We were watching these, the later seasons, plus they were doing reruns of the earlier seasons. So I got to see everything. By the time I was 14, I think I'd probably seen all of them. And this concept, after seeing things like Saturday Night Live, which was much more established, seeing how they would just turn everything on its end and just it seemed revolutionary to us, and it seemed amazing that there were women that they were cross-dressing as women, but that wasn't the butt of the joke. They were very respectful and played them with dignity. It came from inside gay culture. Again, not the butt of the joke. It was a celebration, if anything. And it just seemed free of all of the celebrity references that when you're 10 years old watching Saturday Night Live, I'm not getting all of those. The only celebrity they really talked about was the Queen of England, and that was a whole nother thing. But they were just doing something so different that even at that age, I had recognized what the conventions were and how they were just going against all of that and making something which to us at that very young age just seemed amazing and revolutionary.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of obviously, we can make that comparison to SNL, but you're totally right. Like you can like go back, and I'm sure we all did kind of leading up to the recording of this episode, like watch old episodes of Kids in the Hall and they stand up versus like if you go back and you watch like episodes from SNL around that time, like 89 to the early 90s or whatever, it's like they're very dated and obviously lots of references to what's going on in the news or pop culture and everything. So it's almost like this show kind of stands up a little bit, holds up a lot better here over time anyway.
I love the element in both of your stories that have this friend kind of introducing or giving it like a heads up about this. I think there's absolutely something there in that, and how we learned about things and had this kind of comedic identity formed in there. Bryce, is there a friend in your story? Is there going to be a third shout out here?
There is not a third shout out. Unfortunately, I was like Indy. I was definitely too young to kind of like be watching it, but like I remember I must have been around the age of like probably 9 or 10, I think, when I first saw an episode. And while it was like originally airing on CBC, and by the way, Caroline, for with those facts, I had no idea that it aired on CBS in the States. So that definitely surprised me. But yeah, I remember like just maybe getting to stay up late one night on the weekend and just occasionally like I just caught like an episode and thought it was just like kind of even seemed like at that age I'm like I don't know, I'm not getting a lot of these jokes, but it's funny. Like I, you know, at the time I thought it was really weird. Like I remember there being I think a chicken lady sketch on it and not really knowing what was going on, but yeah, definitely discovered it at way too young of an age, and yeah, definitely watched it more so as a teenager, and kind of along with Mr. Show, which is another great kind of sketch show, which was on HBO at the time with David Cross and Bob Odenkirk. So yeah, I was definitely more so kind of into that stuff as a teenager. Caroline, when did you first start watching it?
I didn't really. That's I guess my big confession, which is I've never regularly watched or really known it. It's always been just kind of a thing that I've known about and is there. And I think that's the difference between coming to it when it was airing versus when it was on the Comedy Network, where it ran all the time, and it was just kind of already there, and you knew about it, you saw it, you had the conventions of it, but it was never really something that I paid attention to until I think later on, after some of the guys got different roles in other things, and you started to knew and see them, and that you knew that there was this common um, uh, kind of origin point or kind of forming place for them, and kind of going back to it. I did see. I couldn't figure out the year, but I did see them when they were on tour and performing here
Hmm.
in Edmonton, and it was amazing. Like it was very funny, and I mean, I wasn't surprised. I didn't go into it going like, "What is this?" or "This isn't my taste," because I knew it would be, but it was just like seeing it live was another kind of amazing experience, and really enjoyed that. Yeah. So we've talked about how we all kind of got to the show, and we some of the characters have come up. Let's open it up. I think this is going to be like the biggest part of our discussion here. What are some of your favorite characters or sketches? Kyle, I'll start with you.
So many to choose from, but if I had to choose my favorite character, the one who I've quoted the most over the years, it's probably the little boy played by Bruce McCullough, Gavin. If anybody who doesn't know, Gavin is a chatty young boy who approaches strangers and just starts talking to them. He was first introduced in a sketch where Mark McKinney was painting a chair. He just came over and started telling him facts. And there's another good one where he was in a butcher shop with Kevin McDonald. That's the one where he says, "If my head were veal, which I know it is not, how much would it cost?"
The other line too from that sketch that always cracks me up is, of course, he's in the butcher shop and he's like, and Gavin's like, "One thing that I don't want to be when I grow up is a butcher." Is that what you wanted to be when you were a kid like me?
Exactly. Dream come true.
I love when he gets the price of what his
Yeah.
head would be as veal, and then he just says, "No, I don't think I'll sell."
And then earlier in the painting a chair sketch, where he's just like, "There's some kids at school and they smoke, and they taught a dog to smoke," that sort of thing. You know, there's a darker version of that character in Brain Candy, if you remember, Cancer Boy. He's essentially Gavin,
Yes.
only dying. So I like a lot of the two-man teams that Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald did. The Sizzler sisters. I'm Jelly Sizzler. The nobody likes us guys. And my favorite, Sir Simon Milligan and Manservant Hecubus from the Pit of Ultimate Darkness. Evil! That one. So I think Darniel is an underrated character because he's kind of irritating, and that's the point. I especially like his the sketch where he's the host of a painting show, and when he's talking about emotion in painting, he has a painting of a unicorn who is trapped on the aircraft carrier and can't get off, and that's his example of an emotional painting. I like Rob Torkelson's Armada, featuring Herman Menderchuk, who I don't think ever made it. And the married couple played by Scott Thompson and Bruce McCulloch, Gordon and Fran. I think Fran is Scott Thompson's best female character. He's very convincing as a sort of a middle-class housewife who puts up with an awful lot from her husband and son. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot more I could mention, but I'll, let Indy name some of his friend name everybody.
We'll see what else comes up.
I was going to say, Caroline, I hope you're making a list here because I imagine you can kind of go down in a YouTube rabbit hole and just watch all these characters after we're done recording here today.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, I do have some level of familiarity with a lot of it. Part of that I think is from just being interested in pop culture, in comedy, in Canadian media as well. But one of the things I love and I think is so important to do like this kind of comedy successfully is the specificity. Like Gavin he is such a specific character. He is not, it's not just a whole mess of traits or tics or things that might make him funny. He is a singular, it's just very focused and they know who these characters are. That's kind of specificity always jumps out at me in seeing who they're playing.
And I think too, like everybody's had a conversation with a kid like Gavin at some point, just a kid who just asks way too many questions and gives you way too many facts and probably tells you a little bit too much about their life.
Especially working where we work. I've had a lot of conversations like that over the last few years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Indy, how about you? Like, what are some of your favorite characters or sketches?
So when I knew we were going to be asked this, I thought I'd just write a couple down off the top of my head, and then my list was 14 sketches just in a couple of minutes. So I think I have some more categories of sketches that I really liked a lot. Because this may have been the first place where I learned about that fine line between comedy and tragedy, because so many of their skits, they weren't funny in a traditional way at all. Because if I tell you the description of them, they're very sad or shocking, but there's something about the presentation and about these actors that made it hilarious. And I think it introduced an entire generation of people like me who are now using comedy to deal with their own personal tragedies. But that's what they were doing. And one that comes to mind is the Daddy Drank sketch, which starts with a father telling his son as he tucks him in, "Remember, I can murder you in your sleep. All you have to be is quiet and willing to do it. And son, I'm willing to do it. And I've got quiet shoes." And for people who have not seen The Kids in the Hall, you are clearly thinking like, why is that funny? How is that funny? And then the punchline is just that his father is an alcoholic. So that makes it sadder and more depressing. And then when you realize that Kevin wrote this, and those are actual lines that his own father said to him, it's so much sadder. But then you realize that you are watching therapy. That is what's happening there. And that release, going back to, you can go back as far as drama has been written, that laughter is what cuts through the tragedy and helps people cope with it. And that's what they were doing in so many of these really sad sketches. And even if I didn't know maybe that's why I was laughing at it, it definitely worked on me and made me laugh at the saddest, most shocking things. And it totally worked on me, though.
Yeah, Dave Foley's delivery of some of those horrible lines is utterly sincere and for some reason utterly hilarious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just listened to an interview with Kevin McDonald on a podcast, and he mentioned specifically in that sketch when his dad comes in and says, "How many girls called you today?"
Yeah.
And you know what that leads to? I'm not going to finish the quote because it's offensive, but that is definitely something that his dad actually said to him. So, how many girls yesterday? You know what they say? 0 + 0 = and So,
Wow.
yeah, I like a lot of the sketches about depressed or drunken parents.
And there's a lot of drunken
there
fathers in the
is.
show
There's
because
the
I think 4 of them had drunk fathers.
yeah, exactly. And so, where does comedy come from?
Yeah, there was one I watched last night where it was like kid's 13th birthday. And he's like, you're going to become a man today. And Bruce McCullough plays the father and puts him in, the kid's having a birthday party, awkward junior high party downstairs. So he whisks the kid away from his own birthday party, gets in the family station wagon, drives out to the middle of nowhere. And you see this bottle of booze just like wrapped up in the brown paper bag sitting on the dash. And he gets out there and he's just like, it's like, all right, in our family, when we turn 13, you become a man. And that's by watching me drink this whole bottle and get drunk. And it's just, the sketch is like his dad just like getting way too drunk, just, telling him about, his life and all of this other stuff. And then of course the kid has to like drive back to the party on his own. And that's how he becomes a man. But yeah, it's just, I mean, it's pretty dark, but at the same time, it's funny.
Totally.
I think I also really loved so many of those ones. It probably happened in later seasons a bit more, where they were just essentially bizarre and cerebral art films. Like there's the Love and Sausages, which I hear spent their season's budget on. The one about thanking them for not letting the monkeys out, where it's just this world where one man in a town has this power over the entire community because we assume, has a bunch of monkeys and he has them chained up. And at any time he could let them out and they would overrun the town and everyone's constantly thanking him. But they live under the threat of being of the monkeys being let out. And I think there were so many of those that didn't have any real punchline or sometimes even a structure to them. There were just things that happen. And as someone who was just getting into filmmaking at a very young age, it just blew my mind. And it made me appreciate and understand the absurd. And it also led me to understand those classic structures that they were playing with, because I'd be aware of what those sketches were diverging from. And that would make me understand like audience expectation. And so much of writing is knowing those audience expectations and playing with them. Like last night, I watched the one where the entire premise is there's a factory where the men who work there have to stand there with their hands motionless in a vat of dead fish. And then they get replaced by automation. And that's the sketch. And that's not a premise that should be successful. And I watch it and it's just hilarious to me.
Well, I was just going to say, Love and Sausages in particular has always stuck with me. I mean, it could take place in the same world as David Lynch's Eraserhead. It could be behind the Iron Curtain. It could be a dystopian future. It could just be this weird dream world. And another one like that was The Big Bucks, about the guy who scoops up roadkill to sell to rich degenerates. Says, that's why I get the big bucks.
And the production value on that is so interesting.
Exactly,
They're borrowing from things like German Expressionism and they're putting them in this ridiculous sketch, and it's amazing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Manservant Hecubus in the Pit of Darkness, he seems to me to be based on the character of Cesare from Cabinet of Dr.
Caligari. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, we should just hang out and do this for hours.
Sorry.
You know what? I often put at the library, we have staff pick stickers, and I'll get something that I was going to put my sticker on, and it often says Kyle. So I'm wondering if this is the Kyle that always has the things that I love.
If it's a horror movie, probably.
Yeah,
it's probably me.
My boy Kyle.
Yeah.
Indy, I'm curious, were there other categories of sketches that you had?
Those two I really love, but then there's just ones that are, like you were saying, so specific, and Salty Ham is one that comes to mind.
Gordon Fran.
Gordon and Fran are hilarious, and you know these characters. even if they are reoccurring, but if you watch 30 seconds of those two playing against each other, you know exactly who they are. And that kind of informs characters like that go throughout the series, that everything makes sense. And you probably know someone who is like that, or just a maybe not so heightened version of that, of course. But the specificity that they have of these characters that are just so mundane, but we get these little slices of their mundane life, and it's blown out to actually not even an extreme, but just a very specific point where you absolutely know where everyone is coming from and how these people would act. And this was one of the first sketch comedies I feel like that I would watch where I felt that they were good actors as well.
Mhm.
They're great comedians, and they talk about that in some of their interviews and stuff, of how that was a big concern, that they couldn't hold the dramatic scenes, but they really go for it and they play it exactly like when they are doing the cross-dressing characters. There's no camp unless
Yeah.
the character is in like Buddy Cole or something, but they don't go for that. And it was just such an interesting place to watch these ridiculous characters come from a really grounded reality.
Yeah, that's what separates them from Python. And when the way they do drag, it isn't look at these funny men dressed up like women. It's like these are actual characters, as you say, very specific characters. So yeah.
When I was doing my fact research on this, I came across, a comment from Jem, or more of an explanation maybe, that they didn't set out to be kind of have the fact that they dressed or played as women be a hallmark of the show. They just couldn't. They just wanted to write great characters, and a
Mhm.
lot of the great characters they were writing happened to be women. And I mean, part of me reads that and goes, well, then why isn't there a woman in the group? But I'm willing to put that aside, and recognize that the way that they played the characters was just so important to that success.
Caroline, do you have some
I
favorites?
do. Yeah, I do. And that there's one that truly I think about all the time, and that's career-ending moments, where Dave Foley is playing a character who is accepting an award like at the Oscars, and it thanks her manager, her director, her family. She thanks Hitler. She thanks the cast. And then, the audience is like with her. And then as soon as she thanks Hitler, it like there's silence. And then she goes off, and Kevin McDonald is her manager. And, and he's just like, you thanked Hitler. You like, she's like, what? And the way that Dave Foley delivers the line, like the incredulous, I never, like, because like denying that she had just thanked Hitler is so funny to me. But whenever I am doing any kind of like public speaking, I have that in my mind as this like, I'm not intending to say anything that is controversial. I'd never do that. It's always there as kind of like a thing in the background. And I find that one very funny.
Caroline, I think on one of the very first episodes that you were on with me, it was maybe before you started co-hosting. I think I made a reference to Hitler in that episode, and I think you told me about that sketch after the fact.
Yeah.
So I kind of picture you in your head as you're heading into this recording, me like, okay, don't thank Hitler or anything like that.
Even now, I have to kind of fight my instinct to make it really, really, really clear that I am not actually thanking Hitler as me, Caroline. So
That's right.
I want that on record. Yeah.
Nice. So the kids have all had interesting careers in comedy since the show first aired. What other projects have you enjoyed them in? Caroline, I'm going to circle back to you on this one because we kind of teased the whole Christmas episode thing.
Yeah, and I think I may have talked about this one in the past. Dave Foley's True Meaning of Christmas Specials. That's the full title of it. It first aired in 2002 on the CBC, never to be aired again because they did not properly clear the music rights that they needed for it. Luckily, YouTube exists, so it's there. And the premise is that Dave Foley has now reached the pinnacle of his career, the most important part of a celebrity's life. He's hosting his own Christmas special. But as he goes through the motions, he realizes that he actually like doesn't have Christmas in his heart, and he needs to know kind of like how to do this properly. And it then kind of morphs into a Christmas Carol takeoff with the ghosts of Christmas specials past. You have Dave Thomas playing Bob Hope for like going through the Christmas specials past. Joe Flaherty plays Bing Crosby, and then Christmas specials present, which kind of shows what's happening now. And Kevin McDonald is the ghost of Christmas specials yet to come, who shows Dave Foley this kind of dystopian Soylent Green-esque world where Christmas specials have become homogenized and terrible. And anyway, it's so funny to me. I love it so much. It's the cast. There's appearances by Mike Myers, Tom Green, um, Elvis Stojko, like Jan Arden. It has everyone, and I love it so much. I watch it every year, and to me, like it's a huge like landmark thing that has Dave Foley and Kevin McDonald, but really it's a special that aired on the CBC once 20 years ago.
Wow. Admitted, it was Elvis Stojko that made you want to watch that special, wasn't it?
That may have been a factor. It might also have just been Christmas. Like I love Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a pretty great combination there.
Kyle, how about you? Is there a favorite project?
Dave Foley's vehicle News Radio was a really funny. It was a really funny sitcom. I can't remember how many years it ran. That also featured, of course, the late great Phil Hartman and notorious characters like Andy Dick and Joe Rogan, back when he was just a bro comedian. And it also introduced one of our great character actors, at least introduced to me, Stephen Root. And it was consistently funny and strange. The kids were on it. Also, some of the cast members of Mr. Show appeared on it eventually. And I would absolutely recommend that if it is streaming anywhere, or actually I didn't look up to see if EPL has access to it. I'm not sure. And I just want to mention one movie Mark McKinney made, the Guy Madden film, The Saddest Music in the World, where he was the leading man opposite Isabella Rossellini. And another one of Guy Madden's strange sort of nostalgic fantasias. And I think one of the closest thing to a mainstream movie that I think he's ever done. Yeah. So, because it actually played in theaters. I saw it at the downtown, I think, at the Landmark. But, and Mark McKinney is perfect playing a sort of a 1930s character. He gets to use clipped delivery and wear a little mustache. And yeah, it's very good. So I don't recommend that one to everybody. If you've look it up first, read a little bit about Guy Madden first and see if that's something you'd be interested in. But I definitely recommend News Radio to anyone.
Yeah, that's a great show. That was my pick as well. Glad you mentioned Stephen Root, because such an underrated actor, and then also voice actor as well. So he plays Bill Daughtry on King of the Hill, which is one of my all-time favorite animated shows.
And he's the guy who has the red stapler, right? Office
he's
Space?
Milton Office Space, totally. He's on Barry now.
Another very underrated show you should definitely check out. Indy.
Well, News Radio was the first thing that came to mind for me as well. I think a lot of people now will be familiar with Mark McKinney in Superstore. I watched Brain Candy when it came out. Didn't love it, but it was just nice to see them again. And I felt the same with Death Comes to Town. And I'll probably leave Kevin's appearance as the denim vest guy for Bryce to talk about. I assume that would be one of yours. So I'll say I did just read the book One Dumb Guy by Paul Myers, who is Mike Myers' brother, and it is the kind of authorized biography of the kids in the hall. So it talks a lot about their years coming up. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time on the show as a whole. Probably about a third of the book is that, and then what they've been doing since. And it talks about the relationships and the behind the scenes stuff, which for sure probably only enjoyable for a fan like myself, but if you are, I'd recommend going and checking that out.
On our last episode where we were talking about the making of The Godfather, Overdue Finds family member Camila Fida was talking about how she almost enjoys reading about the behind the scenes of like the making of shows versus like actually watching them. And yeah, I find that stuff absolutely fascinating too. Whereas like, yeah, I'm a big fan of Kids in the Hall. I don't know too many details about the behind the scenes stuff, but yeah, that sounds like it would be an amazing book to read. I'm going to have to check that one out.
So let's talk about the new Amazon show. As Bryce mentioned, we are recording this the day before it airs. How are you feeling about this show? How do you feel about maybe revisiting shows in general? And will you be watching? Oh, Indy, I'll start with you.
Of course, I'm going to watch. It doesn't matter what they do. If I have access to it, I'll watch it. But I definitely worry about it. Reboots in general, there has been very few successful ones in my mind. And I worry about it specifically because being subversive and being anti-establishment and outlandish was kind of their core and maybe their biggest strength. And I don't know how you can be very anti-establishment if you've been in the business for 30 years. Like, it seems harder to come from a place of rebellion. But the more I look into their old stuff, and after reading that book as well, they're going to find something. I absolutely believe there will be a lot of good content in it. Whether it can live up to what they were doing before, that's a whole nother question, and I feel like I can't go in expecting that. I just want to kind of get reacquainted with these actors. Maybe not even the characters, because some of their repetitive characters weren't always my favorites, but there are certain things that each one of these guys as actors and writers brings to it, and that's what I want to see again.
Yeah, no, I feel pretty much the same way. What I really hope is acknowledge the passage of time. I mean, you can't really ignore the fact that they're older and so on like that. But and if they do bring back any of the characters, and it does actually look like Bruce McCullough is going to be playing a 60-year-old Gavin.
I did see that, yeah.
Just acknowledge it. Don't try to hide it. Don't try, because I remember watching, it was a while ago now, John Cleese and Michael Palin doing the parrot sketch when they were, I think, in their 60s, and it was a little sad. It was by rote. It wasn't very energetic and so on like that. So that's what I hope is just lean into the fact that I think the youngest of them is 59 and the oldest is 62. Oh, today's Bruce McCullough's birthday, by the way. I'm not sure how old he actually is, but I saw that on Twitter this morning. And don't try to hide the fact that time has passed. And what is subversive for a 62-year-old? I'm curious to see what that is. So, yeah, I definitely will watch it. But, my expectations are tempered.
I hope they bring back the he's cool, hip, he's cool, he's 40,
yeah,
but now
he's cool,
it'll be funny the other way around.
Yeah. I was just watching that last night, actually, and I was like, he's cool, he's hip.
When I turned 45, my friend sent me that on Facebook.
Yeah. Bryce, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Indy and Kyle. Yeah, like I'm 100% gonna watch it. I'm not expecting it to be like, I don't know, like I'm going in there and I think it's cool that they're doing it, and I kind of hope that they do keep it a little edgy, kind of like the original series, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm just glad that they're doing it again. How about you? Are you going to check it out?
Amazon is one of the few streaming services that I do not have. And I think that that's kind of fitting because it means that I'll kind of be coming to it after it's already out. And so I might not be riding that peak wave of it, but enjoying what it's contributing to the kind of pop culture landscape, I think. Yeah. Bryce, before we get to today's roundtable questions, can you share with listeners what we'll be talking about on our next episode coming out on Friday, June 3rd?
Yeah, so endings can make or break a good book, movie, TV show, or surprisingly, even an album. So, on the next episode, we're going to be sharing ours and other EPL staff members' picks for the best and worst endings. So, there's a good chance that you'll be hearing some talk about Seinfeld and How I Met Your Mother on that one. Caroline, you posted something kind of internally. I think it was yesterday, the day before.
Yeah.
Just getting staff's picks, and there's lots to go from right now. And it's funny because I thought everybody was going to go really negative, but there's some good kind of picks for great endings.
I've been really enjoying seeing the comments come in. There are definitely ones that I hadn't thought about but totally agree with. And I think we're going to have some really great conversations around even the idea of like what makes a really satisfying ending for something and how that might be different for a book or a movie versus a longer running show. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this episode. Sure that we'll have lots of controversial takes on things.
Be trying to make it as spoiler free as possible,
Yeah.
which will be a challenge.
I think Kids in the Hall had a great finale. Their original run, they actually brought back so many of these characters and wrapped them up, which was a lot of fun to see.
So our first roundtable question, which Kids in the Hall actor would you most want to go on a cross-country road trip with?
Well, my first instinct was Scott Thompson, because he seems the most outgoing. He seems the chattiest. But for those exact reasons, maybe not. And Bruce strikes me as someone who's, when he's not on, is a bit taciturn. So I think either Dave Foley or Kevin McDonald. Maybe Dave Foley. Kevin seems like and I don't mean this in a bad way, he seems like a little bit of a sad sack. So, but Dave, I would have so much to talk to him about, like, hey, what was it like working with Phil Hartman, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I would probably go with Dave Foley. Although I think Scott Thompson would be great for a short road trip.
Well, this is the thinking about it, throwing in cross country. This is a big country, so that definitely might change the answer. Indy?
Originally, I thought of Scott Thompson as well, but in their DVD release that had a documentary of their tour, there's one sequence where Scott Thompson is going to be on Conan O'Brien and he cancels, and the showrunners for Conan are playing back the pre-interview for, I think it's Kevin and Dave. And it's just Scott talking and answering questions, and then he spills a tray of coffee, and he loses his mind, and it is the funniest thing. And it's completely unintentional. He's not doing a bit. And he's just going, oh no, I've ruined the couch. This couch costs so much money. And the interviewer's trying to tell him, like, it's a hotel. They get paid for that. They'll clean it up. And he's just so upset about this. So I feel like I couldn't go on a road trip with Scott. It would be too much. And I feel like Kevin is often overlooked. So I'm going to pick Kevin because I feel like we could chat a lot.
Bryce?
I went with Bruce McCullough for mine. He's actually was born and raised here in Edmonton. So I know he moved to Calgary, I believe, kind of as a teenager maybe. But yeah, I think he seems like he'd be kind of pretty laid back, hopefully. And yeah, I think we could kind of talk about growing up on the prairies together. So that would be my pick. Caroline, how about you?
I went with Mark McKinney, and I love that my first instinct was also Scott Thompson. And after so many people immediately went to him, nobody ended up picking him. So, yeah, we still. I agree with Kyle though. Length totally matters for the
Yes.
for the road trip. That's a good tip for people to take away. Okay, if there's one thing we love doing at Overdue Finds, it's coming up with home run content ideas for various content services and then giving them away for free because at EPL we share. So, what other late 80s, early 90s Canadian TV show would you like to pitch to Amazon or another service that you think they should maybe revisit in some way? Kyle?
I thought I had a great joke for this, but then I checked the internet and it's already a meme. I was going to say Littlest Hobo with a shotgun, but no. Evidently, that's already a meme. So, does anybody remember a show starring? It was the early '90s, I think, with Rick Mercer called Made in Canada. Yeah, it was hit and miss, but it was a very it could really see the future because it was a show right at about the cable boom, and it was about how television was just turning into a content machine. Now in 2022, with all the streaming services, that's even more the truth. It's amazing we get as much good stuff as not. So just revisiting that premise of a small to middle-sized Canadian production company trying to keep up with the changes in television production and television distribution, now I think could be a good show. And I like Rick Mercer. He's a funny guy, so.
Well, I did absolutely choose The Littlest Hobo. Everything's getting a gritty reboot right now. Why not The Littlest Hobo? I'd pitch doing it as it would be to the 80s series as Riverdale is to Archie Comics. We make it super dark. Every time Littlest Hobo finds like a bag of money or something, it turns out there was this big plot where a husband has killed the wife and has hid the body, and they're trying to embezzle all this money. And meanwhile, you just get this kid dog who's just kind of on the peripheral of all of this, solving the mystery but not quite understanding the terrible, terrible, terrible truth about small town Canada that he's uncovering along the way.
Totally. Same theme song though.
Yeah.
Even if it's a dark.
Yeah, but I could also hear maybe tomorrow like done as like a gritty cover.
Yeah.
Oh, just a really stripped, sparse down kind of country, kind of bluesy, just acoustic guitar with a guy with a real gravelly voice.
Yeah.
We get Tom Waits on this. Yeah, I'm on board.
Lots of dark shots of the Littlest Hobo just in the train yard. It's all dark and everything. And yeah. Right? So I also had the Littlest Hobo. Perfect. But Indy, I actually like your idea more than mine. So I went with a little bit of a different route with my Littlest Hobo reboot. So I was thinking like, part of the fun, like if you ever come across it, like if CTV's airing it in like really early morning or something like that, part of the charm I think of watching Littlest Hobo, besides like the awesome theme music, is just like, of course it takes place in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, and it's just the acting's a little questionable. Like it's just very, very Canadian. So my reboot, first of all, the theme music absolutely stays as is, but I want them to really kind of lean into the cheesiness of the original show. And I actually want to have it also set in the 80s, in the early 80s with today's actors. So just kind of really kind of lean into like the absurd storylines with like, you know, a bag of money that's Littlest Hobo comes across, or a little, you know, blind kid who needs help or something like that. So just really lean into the 80s and cheesiness of the Littlest Hobo. So that's where I'm going with my remake anyway. But Indy, I like your idea better though. But that poor dog just being like, you know, coming across a triple murder or something like that, and he's got to help solve the case. Caroline, how about you?
Littlest Hobo was also on my short list. So there's definitely something there. I went with the raccoons. I don't know if anyone remembers the late 80s, early 90s cartoon about Bert Raccoon, who lives in the Evergreen Forest. He's friends with Cedric, whose father, Cyril Sneer, not the hero of the story, in case I need to tell you that, is trying to chop down the forest. And so definitely environmental themes that resonate, power, class. I think what I would do for this is take it from cartoon to live action, but people in like animal costumes, like almost like mascot costumes, but playing it totally straight. Like like that is not the joke. They are just life-size animals interacting with each other. Living in the forest, like I said, money as a topic, environmental issues, industry, family dynamics, all of this. So much potential for the raccoons.
We're giving all these streaming services just gold
I
mine
know.
ideas today.
We should go back and make a list of like all our amazing pitches that we've done over the course of our 100+ episodes, because honestly, there are some good ones.
There were some good ones in there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for joining us today. This has been such a fun conversation. And as I said, I've got so much to go and look up and catch up on now. Is there anything coming up that you would like our listeners to know about? Indy?
Well, along with being a part of the children's library here at the Shelley Milner Children's Library, I work on what we call the literacy vans, which are out and about in communities again, bringing library programming to you. So we do everything from our Sing, Sign, Laugh, and Learn programs. Sometimes we're taking robotics out there, and you can do it in sign up for a class on that, or even 3D printing, which is coming to your community. So if you want to find out about where we will be next, because it's always changing, you just head down to epl.ca and click on what's on, and you can see where we are, which might be new to you. And also my podcast, I Love This, You Should Too. Once I watch the new run of Kids in the Hall, I'll probably talk about that on there. But it's a podcast that my wife and I host, and we take turns bringing movies to the other person. We have very different tastes. So on her side, we've been running through all of the Step Up movies, which has been eye-opening to me and actually very interesting. And I've gotten her to watch her first 50s sci-fi ever. So that's a good trade-off, I think.
And you guys release episodes like every week,
Monday.
right?
So wherever you're listening to this, you can check out I Love This, You Should Too.
It's a great show. Definitely recommend checking it out.
Great. Kyle, is there anything coming up at Clairview that listeners might want to check out?
Happy to say that our face-to-face programming is really up and running now. We've had really good response to Sing Sign. We're actually expanding it to 3 a week now. And also our STEAM-oriented ones, STEAM Lab, which I'm doing later today, and Discovery Club are just up and running. We have something specific here and called, and I know this is a lame name, everybody knows it, Teen Talk, which is an effort to try to engage some of the teens that have started to use our space and coming back. And it's up and down. You know how it is when you're trying to bond with people that age. They just see my gray hair and are very suspicious. So. But what's particularly unique to Clairview is we have a book club here like no other. There's been 2 sessions so far. There's a third one, which I'm afraid is probably going to happen before this airs. But library assistant Amy Wong was behind the Conversations About Death and Dying book club. I don't know if you heard about it. It's not as dire as it sounds. I think it's a very positive thing overall. The first session, which was online, was actually quite well attended. And it isn't for people to come in and it's not about grieving. It's about literally having conversations about a topic that a lot of people would just rather not talk about. They did the book Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, which is a very funny series of questions from children about death and dying. And I think the next session is about the art of racing in the rain. And hopefully they'll get a few people in that. So Amy worked very hard on it, and so did our community librarian Sue. So I wanted to give that a plug. And I contributed a bit. I did a facilitator's package for it, and sort of took part in the pilot that we did. So yeah, I want to get more out there because I'd like for this to be a success, and it's a bit of an uphill battle talking about this particular subject. So.
And Amy brings a brilliant and very important perspective to that. So I haven't been in the book club, but...
Yeah, she's trained as a death doula.
Yeah.
Amy used to work on the podcast as well. So Yeah, it's great to hear about what she's working on now. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to subscribe so that you automatically get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you can, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. We, of course, love to hear from our listeners. You can reach us on Twitter at EPL.ca or use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. And even better, you can also send us an email at podcast@EPL.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.